knowledgeable about Ukraine and what the needs are, and continued support for lethal aid for Ukraine. And I hope this body continues to support Ukraine. I ask unanimous consent that the Senate proceed to the immediate consideration of my bill, which is at the desk. I further ask that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, that the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object.
The senator from Vermont.
And I will object. I agree, the senator from Florida, we have a responsibility to help Americans in the wake of disasters. It doesn't matter if you're a Republican or Democrat, or if you're from a blue state or a red state. I certainly voted, I don't want to interrupt the conversation of the senator from Florida, but if the staff can tell him when he gets through his conversation that I said to he and the senator from Ohio, I don't want to interrupt their conversation, but I have certainly voted for helping their Florida and their states when they've had it, when they've had disasters. That's why I included $27.1 billion disaster assistance in the omnibus bill I filed last night. The money will go to states that have been hit hard by natural disasters, including Hurricane Ian. The disaster supplemental included in the omnibus is nearly identical to the bill the senator from Florida is proposing. Now the difference is when the omnibus has a clear path to becoming law now. It's part of a bipartisan bicameral bill that will pass this week. We don't have time to play politics on it. We have to enact the bill. We have to aid the people in Florida. We have to aid those veterans that are suffering from burns, from the pits that they've served near. We have to help the people whose hospitals are overcrowded. We have so many other things we have to help. So if the senator from Florida, and he has an absolute right to bring up a bill that basically takes care of his needs, he has an absolute right to do that next year. But this bill, this omnibus supplemental bill, is to help every state, but primarily the United States. So I'll object, and therefore I do object.
Objection is heard.
Madam President.
The senator from Florida.
Madam President, I've been in the Senate for about 4 years now, and I'm not sure I can recall a day before this one that was so perfectly exposed Washington's total dysfunction. Last night, or I guess this morning, just before 1:30 a.m., Senate leadership finally dropped the $1.7 trillion Pelosi-Schumer spending bill, all 4,155 pages of it. In typical Washington fashion, hostages have been taken to pressure members of this body to approve this bill without a reasonable opportunity to review, debate, or amend it. Most important to me are the Florida families fighting hard to recover from Hurricane Ian and Nicole that are being used as pawns in exchange for approval of the massive and reckless $1.7 trillion Pelosi-Schumer spending bill. Immediately after the storm passed, I made clear that I would fight for and support a standalone disaster aid funding package to give Floridians the assistance they needed to recover. I wrote to Senators Leahy and Shelby, the Senate top appropriators, urging them to work with me on getting much-needed aid to Florida families as quickly as possible in a standalone disaster supplemental bill. My letter to them was written on September 30, just 2 days after Ian made its catastrophic landfall near Fort Myers, Florida. But the aid Floridians desperately needed was delayed and turned into a hostage taken by Senate leadership so that it could be stuffed in this massive omnibus bill. To tell folks in the Sunshine State who are still picking up the pieces left by Ian and Nicole that this aid only comes as part of the 4,000-plus page omnibus spending bill is sickening, and I'm not going to stand for it. Government does have an essential role to play in our society and core responsibilities to fulfill. We all pay taxes so that government has the resources to keep its promises to us and provide core services like national defense, Social Security, and Medicare. If this spending bill helped balance a budget and only contain the things that the federal government should be responsible for, I gladly vote for it without hesitation. But that's not what we're facing here. When I ran for the Senate in 2018, I promised Florida families to make Washington work for them. That doesn't mean zero federal funding. It means responsible spending by Congress that is accountable to the taxpayers who fund it. That's how we governed when I was governor of Florida, and the result was better returns for our state's families. Because we governed responsibly, the economy grew. A growing economy meant we could cut taxes and pay off state debt, while also making record investments in education, environment, and public safety. Washington can work this way too, but not while failed politicians refuse to be accountable with your money. The truth is that more than 4,000 pages, the Pelosi-Schumer spending bill has a lot of policies and funding priorities I actually fought for. There's more funding to preserve and protect Florida's Everglades, funding to support our military, and yes, disaster aid for the families and communities devastated by Hurricanes Ian and Nicole. I support all these things, but I will never support the other parts of the bill that continue gross, reckless spending of taxpayer dollars. These are things like $2.3 million so the Department of Education can reach out to student loan borrowers and urge them to apply for Biden's illegal debt forgiveness program that has been blocked by the federal courts. More than 7,500 member projects or earmarks, funding for Biden to continue supersizing the IRS with 87,000 new agents, and continuation policies that force every family to give the IRS visibility into their personal finances. And we just found out this terrible bill prohibits Border Patrol from using its funding to do its job and secure the border. The bill says, and I'm now quoting, "None of the funds provided in subsection 1A shall be used to acquire, maintain, or extend border security technology and capabilities, except for technology and capabilities to improve Border Patrol processing," end quote. So nothing to stop illegal crossings. We are just going to focus on processing people who already broke the law by illegally crossing the border. And while we are throwing a muzzle on our own Border Patrol, we are giving money to other countries like Egypt to secure their borders. That makes no sense. We can do both. Florida families deserve better than to be forced to accept these radical policies and more reckless spending in exchange for disaster relief. It's insane that I even need to come to the Senate floor to say that, but I'm sick and tired of seeing dysfunction in Washington create hard times for families in the Sunshine State. So I'm here today to get things done for families in my state who are hurting, and ask that the Senate immediately take up and pass the disaster aid continued in the omnibus as a separate and standalone measure. This is the exact same language as what was written in the omnibus bill that my Democrat colleagues seek to pass. I did not limit this just to Florida. The aid I was asking the Senate to pass benefits other states that have been impacted by disasters like tornadoes, flooding, and wildfires too. More aid may be needed, but getting this done is a good first step and is something that should never have been jammed into a massive end-of-year spending bill. So we can fix that error today, pass this on its own, and get relief on its way to families and communities in need. Unfortunately, I'd hope my colleagues would see the common sense in this simple request. Instead, Democrats blocked this from passing tonight. Madam President, America's national debt is $31 trillion and growing. When are we going to be so fed up that we decide this isn't sustainable? When we get to 35, 40, or 45 trillion in debt? Too many Democrats and Republicans in Washington are happy to close their eyes, plug their ears, and pass another reckless, multi-trillion-dollar spending bill we can't afford. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to fight every day for Florida families, but I won't cave to more spending and let the hardworking people of my state be treated as pawns in Washington's corrupt spending games. Doing so would be a betrayal of my promise to Floridians that I'll always fight against Washington's corrupt dysfunction and wild spending. We all get hired by voters in our states to represent them here in the Senate. How is adopting a massive 4,000-page plus bill without reading it or debating its contents doing the job we are all got elected to do? Think about it this way. If you hired someone to negotiate a big, expensive contract for you, and they told you to sign it without reading any of it, would you ever hire them again? No, nobody would hire someone like that. But that's exactly what's happening here. We're still being asked to approve this massive bill just days before a new Republican majority takes power in the House. It's nothing short of shameful abandonment and betrayal of our House colleagues and the conservative voters in Florida and across the nation who elected them. And my colleagues' decision to block disaster aid from quickly passing tonight is shameful as well. It's insane that my colleague has insisted on holding this aid hostage in a massive omnibus instead of standing with families hurting from Hurricane Ian and Nicole and getting them relief today. With inflation up nearly 14% since Biden took office, labor participation at historic lows, federal debt skyrocketing, and a recession on the horizon, there has never been a more important time to stand up and demand fiscal sanity in Congress. That's why I think it makes a lot of sense that House Republicans have made clear that they do not support passing the Pelosi-Schumer spending bill. Passing an omnibus right now ties the hands of the new Republican House majority and extends the priorities of Nancy Pelosi and House Democrats, the leaders and party that the American people just voted out of power. Shockingly, some in the Senate have tried to argue that we should ignore the wishes of House Republicans. They argue that expecting a new, slim House Republican majority to keep the government funded is just too much to ask. I think that's nonsense. The way I see it, the decision before Senate Republicans is as simple and straightforward as it gets here in Washington. We can either stand with the Republicans or once again cave to the Democrats. We can either make sure as House Republicans, not Pelosi, and our outgoing Democrat majority, they get a say in how Congress spends taxpayer dollars next year, or we can hand the recently fired Speaker a massive retirement gift on our way out of the door. I'll tell you this, Florida families know that the process we have up here is not working. Inflation is raging. Debt is out of control, and Congress so routinely passes massive, 1,000-page spending bills without giving anyone time to read them that even the press doesn't bother to scrutinize this broken system anymore. While this might be business as usual in Washington, hardworking Americans find it disgusting. Congressional Republicans should be taking every opportunity to stop the reckless big government policies that Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and Senate Democrats have jammed down the throats of the American public over the last 2 years. I promise Florida families that I will do that, and I won't back down on my word. I yield the floor.